We have a new challenge this week. It is the Dungeon Tile Challenge. I've already got 3 here, and I'm going to show you what they look like, and then I'm going to actually show you how to build them. Here's the template for it. This is XPS foam. It's kind of cut in half to about a 1/2 inch, and then it's divided into 1-inch squares here. And the finished product is actually really cool. So these are my dungeon tile experiments so far. I just did a few quick samples. These 2 out of XPS foam. And this one I actually did with clay, and then I put some Dollar Tree foam underneath that, and it looks kind of interesting. These, though, are my favorite by far. They turned out really cool. I was just experimenting with them. This one right here, I incorporated all these little gadgets and gears that I got. I get these things from Michaels. There's all kinds of different things that I use in my builds. I'm always going through Michaels to look at what they have there. And so I just decided this would be a cool way to design a dungeon piece which perhaps could unlock something or open a door or some kind of something like that. So that would be up to the, I guess it's the game master to come up with something like that. But I thought that was kind of a cool idea. This is my swamp tile. It's got kind of a mossy swamp in the middle here, which is probably toxic. So that turned out great, and by far this is my favorite one right here. This has a trap door on it that actually is functioning, and it reveals stairs that may go down into a dungeon or a labyrinth or something like that. That's up to your imagination there. So I'm going to show you how to build each one of these, starting with this one, and then we'll do all 3 of those. So let's get to it. Basically, this is a 3x3 square piece, and I'm going to score this every 1 inch, just about 1/8 of an inch or so. Okay, and then what you're going to want to do is repeat it on the sides, because we're going to want to always carry the detail onto the sides. Okay, to start this tile, what we're going to want to do is put the gear wheel in the middle, and we're just going to trace this around roughly where it's going to sit in the middle. The idea is that this gear would be moving, so we don't want it to be too tight in the circle here. So we're going to cut this out with our X-Acto knife, and I'm going to go down about 3/16 of an inch, I'm guessing. Okay, and then just use whatever material or whatever tool you have to remove some of this material in here. There's no right or wrong way to do this. And again, I just want to go down the thickness of this thing, which is about 1/8 of an inch. Okay, that looks pretty good. And that's a good fit right there. Okay, once I've got that set, I can go ahead and put some of the detail on the tile here. Okay, let me go over that with a pen. Carry down the sides. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Next, I'm going to put the texture on here, and I've got a kind of unique, I'm not the only one who uses this technique, but I'm going to use a soldering iron wrapped in tin foil, and that is going to give me a really cool texture That looks better than just using plain tin foil. Okay, here's how the texturing works. Just real quick rolls of this will give you the texture. You don't want to overdo this. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. And what I'll also do is I'll come back and I'll hit it with some foil, give it some extra texture. Okay, and then what we'll want to do is go back in and hit these lines again, because they've been a little pressed in with the soldering iron. So we'll just go back and hit these again. Also, what I like to do is just add a little bit of depth here by breaking out a few pieces, especially where the cracks are. It makes it look a little bit more 3D, I guess you could say. Okay, that looks pretty good. That goes in there. Now this piece is going to be ready for a layer of coat of Mod Podge. Okay, next is our swamp tile. And to do this one, you just want to start off by making your lines here on top. Always good to start there. And we're just going to choose some sort of a random pattern here. And I'm going to kind of mimic what I have here already. Okay, so there's my pattern. And what I'm going to want to do is cut these a little bit deeper, because we're going to need to go over it with a pen. And actually we're removing some of this material. Okay, and then we're going to start removing material. You can use a knife if you want, or you can just use your fingers, get in there and start removing some of the material. I'm going to go down about maybe a little less than 1/4 inch. Okay, so about like this is fine. Nice and rough. Now here's the fun part. We're going to use nail polish. And this is going to naturally melt the foam. And so I'm just going to go ahead and spread this around and watch the magic happen. And the more you put in one particular area, the more it's going to melt. So you want to make sure it doesn't pool up too much. Otherwise, it might go all the way through your tile. You can also use acetone if you don't have nail polish, and you do have acetone in your garage. That will work. Melts a little bit differently, but it still gives you a nice effect. I'm going to want a couple of deep pools here, so I'm just going to put a few drops where I want it to go down a little deeper. So you can see that working, very cool. And that's going to end up looking like that. So we'll let this dry. Now we're on to the trapdoor dungeon tile. So we have to do several things here. First, we have to create a hinge for the door, and we also have to cut the steps going down into the dungeon tile. So let's go ahead and do that. The only way we're going to get these stairs in here is to cut these pieces apart so that we can work on that. So let's go ahead and, actually I just freehand this. Cut this into 3 sections. And we're going to work on the middle section right here, which is this piece. And this is a little bit tricky, but I'm just going to kind of guesstimate this where I want this to go. I'm going to make a cut right about there. So that's about a 1/2 inch in. And on the same side over here, about a 1/2 inch in. So if you look at this piece, I've got like a 45 or 60 degree angle, which kind of just goes down like this. So I'm just going to freehand this cut and just kind of do it nice and slow. Okay, and then once you make the cut, you should have something like that. Doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to clean this up a little bit. Okay, and then this piece is going to actually become the stairs. So what we're going to want to do is start carving stairs out of this thing. Make sure you have a sharp blade too, because this is really hard to do without it. Next, I'm going to free cut the step pattern here with a pen, and I'm just going to do my best to draw it in, and after I get the stairs sort of where I want them, then I'll go ahead and cut them out with a really sharp blade. But keep in mind, this is going to be a tricky part. It's just a little difficult holding the blade at these angles, but it should look something like this. Now you want to go ahead and take your sharp cutting blade and cut the stairs into the foam piece. If you do this by sliding the blade back and forth, it should go through the foam pretty easily, but you do want to be careful not to cut yourself here. Okay, so you should end up with something like this. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. We are going to make some adjustments. We're going to sand this to make it look a little cleaner. I'll go ahead and clean these up with a nail file. Okay, that looks pretty good. Next, we're going to use a product called Crafter's Pick Crafting Glue, and I love this stuff. It's a water-based super glue, which is basically like it's the same thing as contact cement. So all you need to do is apply this where you need it. It's very thick, and it acts like contact cement. So actually what you want this to do is let it dry. Just get as thin of a layer as you can here. That's going to cover that area right there. And you're going to let it dry. Okay, so a nice thin layer on both sides since it's like contact cement. This glue will get super tacky when it's dry, and it will turn clear, and it will make a great bond. So that's why we're using this. Just as thin as you can, get it on there. Okay, and then I'm going to set this aside, let it dry, and as soon as it's dry, I'm going to put it all back together. And this piece right here now is what you're seeing right here. So I'm going to actually use this as the lid for the door. So what I need to do now is I have to make a little bit of a cut on here to remove some of this material, about a 1/16 of an inch. This is the piece where the door is going to attach to again. Right there. Back to my trap door tile. I've got this glue almost dry. It could be maybe a little bit more dry, but it's pretty good. You can see it turns opaque or clear when it's ready. And so I'm going to go ahead and glue these pieces back together. Okay, and that should give a really tight bond. All right, now the tricky part is right here where we're going to form a hinge. I actually should use wood here because the one that I made here is starting to move around a little bit because there's a metal rod that goes all the way through here making the hinge, and what's happening is it's starting to work its way through the foam, so eventually this will probably fall apart. So I'm thinking I'm going to try and maybe recreate a piece of this out of wood or some other material that's a little bit stronger. So anyways, it goes here like this, and the idea is it's going to be swiveling or hinging up and down with the door on it. Here are all my pieces here. They've been textured and now they are ready for a layer of Mod Podge. What the Mod Podge does is it's going to actually seal the foam and will protect it. So if you're actually going to be using these in a game, this acts as a layer of protectant underneath the paint. It's basically just like priming anything else. If I was working with wood, I would want to use a primer before I painted, and that's exactly what Mod Podge is. So we need to make this door. I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going to use Sculpey, and again, using a rolling pin and some wax paper, I'm going to roll out my piece. I've got my hinge piece here. I've decided to just go ahead and use foam. I was going to use Sculpey, but I'm going to give this a try and see if I can get this to work. I've already pre-punched the holes through here, so this should go through pretty easily. To make this hinge, I'm actually using a straightened out paper clip, so that's all you need here. And that's lined up pretty good, and you can see now we've got a hinge. I've got my Sculpey here, and what I need to do is make it look like this. So what we're going to do is add the wood grain, and first what I need to do is make 3 main planks. So I'll try and divide this up here. And then we'll take these smaller tools here and just add wood grain in. If you want to do a knot, all you have to do is just make a little kind of an oval pattern and then go in there with this tool, make a little knot. And you might have to go back and re-press these main lines in here. Sometimes they get buried. Okay, for my hinge pieces, I'm just going to cut a little strip of clay here, about like that. The hinges are going to have little bolts in them. So let's put those holes in. Here's the Sculpey door from the toaster oven. It is hard now, pretty flat. And let's go ahead. I think I had to sand it a little bit to get it to fit, but that is a perfect fit in there now. My door is going to get a coat of golden brown. And this is obviously just one layer of color here. And you're really not going to see the back of this, but I think what I'll do is probably put some metallic paint on the back just to make it look interesting. Ready for our first wet brush, which is going to be a pewter gray, which is kind of like a dark gray. Pewter gray. And then the idea is to give this good coverage where you are pretty much painting the whole thing, except you're leaving just little bits of the black showing through, especially where the cracks are. And I'm going to leave that black in there. I don't want to paint that. Next on the dungeon tiles is going to be a light brush with granite gray. And this layer you want to be real careful with. You need to just be doing a dry brush technique. So make sure you have some paper towels ready for this one. What we're going to do is load up the brush, and then we're going to take the paint off until I feel like it's pretty dry. Do a little test on my hand. That's pretty good. And then just give it a nice light swipe across the top. And you can see how it highlights all of the edges of the rock details, so that's exactly what we're looking for. Now, if you're paying attention right now, you'll notice that this is a completely different dungeon tile, which I will have to address later. I did make 2 more of these, so perhaps I'll make another video. This is my favorite part when I make these wood doors, is the color scheme here with the golden brown paint and then the Liquitex acrylic ink. And this is a burnt umber color. I use this for all of my wood grain. It looks great. And all you do is load up your brush, and you just want to give it a nice even coating. The paint is going to soak it up, so make sure you get enough to coat everything. And you should only need 1 coat of this. It really soaks in nicely. And that's it. Just let that sit. It's going to dry out. Just uses a little bit of ink, but I love the wood grain. It gives it a really rich brown color. And then we'll paint the metal parts on that. All right, we're back. The door looks good here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hit it with some gunmetal gray. Sorry, just gunmetal. What we have to do now is create this little tiny door handle here. And I've actually managed to get this thing to swing freely, which is not easy to do. So if you see here, there's like a little door ring hinge, and I actually made that by cutting off a little piece of this plastic coating on the copper wire, and then I slice that in half, and that creates that little ring right there. It's a little tricky, but it's a great little detail. Once you get it on there, you've actually got a working door handle on here. So I'll show you how that works. So what we'll do is we'll take a little width of this wire coating, and I'm just going to slice off part of that wire there, and that will make the cover, that will make the doorbell ringer. Here are 2 products that work really well together. This Loctite Super Glue and this Insta-Set, because sometimes when you're working with this stuff, it doesn't set right away. All you have to do is put it on there with the glue and then give it a squirt of this, and it will instantly set, and that works out great. Now let's go back and paint the layers for this mossy swamp tile here. So I'm going to start with a dark base. I've already got the dark in there, so now I'm going to go with a dark green and hit the low spots. And I want to leave a little bit of black in there, but you can go ahead and paint green everywhere else. And you can see this is a English yew green, whatever that is. I just like the color, it looks pretty swampy. So now that this is dry, let's go ahead and get this paint scheme moving along here. I'm going to move up to a light green, and then I'm going to use, I think this is, what is this? Irish cream. So we'll start with this one, light green. And this is just going to be like a dry brush. Not a dry brush, I guess maybe a wet brush, but you're just going to go hit the highlights on some of the high spots here. You don't want to do too much on this, especially in the shallow areas, because We want this to have the illusion that it's getting deeper. So let's just hit all these areas up here with the light green. We're just finishing this up with the little Irish green. And this one we want to be sort of a half wet brush. So we're going to do this lightly, and we just want to touch on the high spots again. Make sure your brush isn't too wet, otherwise it'll just be too messy in here. We're ready to make our swamp tile, or finish our swamp tile. And what I'm going to use is glaze coat. It's a two-part glaze coat. And I like it because it cures super hard. Some of the other stuff I've used, it dries soft and it gets dirty and then you can't clean it. So you don't need a lot of this. You just need a little tiny bit. So I'm just going to coat the bottom of the cup here with a little bit and try and get equal amounts. You've got plenty of time to work with this stuff, so it's not like you have to hurry. It's not like resin. This literally takes, I think, about 24 hours to set. So we'll get these together, give it a good mix, and I'm going to pour it from up high because I want the resin to fill in all of the little detail areas. So if you pour it slowly, it fills up the areas much better. Okay, and I don't want to overfill it, so that looks pretty good. Now we're ready for our final stage, which is a black wash. The black wash has a mixture of probably 90% water, a little bit of black paint, and a couple of drops of dishwashing liquid, which helps it spread over the tile surface. So I haven't black washed this tile yet, my swamp tile. I'm going to show you what that looks like. You can see that it tones down the dry brush layer. So what I'm going to do is take my black wash right here, and I'm going to finish this off with the black wash. And I want to be careful not to get any paint over my water feature there because it's going to not look good. So I'm just going to have to carefully get this around the edges here. To finish this swamp tile, I went ahead and just put some glue on here with a paintbrush and added my green moss, my fine turf texture here. And I think that looks pretty good. I hope you enjoyed the making of these cool dungeon tile pieces for D&D Play. It's a lot of fun making these things. If you have any questions on the 3 that I made in this video, please send me your comments, like us, and of course subscribe. Also, I didn't get a chance to include these 2 tiles in my video. It was just going to be too long, but I did get a lot of comments on this one, the sand creature tile. It's very cool. So I'm going to make a separate video on these 2, and it'll be a much shorter video hopefully, but hope you enjoyed watching, and we'll see you next week.